Hello.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Are you the fellow gister too?
I don't know who that is actually.
Actually, I'm
Oh, okay.
Vrushali.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good, but I'm outside right now, so I can't show you my work.
Okay.
I actually updated the README file, and I seen you have given me access to the organization. Plus, I have completed the UI part, and I'm working on Morris Water Maze human VR simulation. Like we will track the data from our side, like how our pathfinding will be there.
Okay.
I will share the photos once I get my laptop.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the update for now, and then when you get the folder
I
or
want
when you
to
get your
ask.
laptop.
Okay. I wanted to ask that you ask about the extension?
Yes. I haven't heard back though. I think they're probably going to tell us a little bit more later.
Okay. Okay. That will be fine.
Hello, Vrushali and Raj. So I guess we're ready for updates.
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay.
So this week I mostly spent on trying to learn reinforcement learning. I tried to go through some introductory courses, but all needed some knowledge and grasp on some maths topics like Markov chains, Bellman equations, and the Bellman optimal equations, etc. So I spent a good time trying to understand these concepts. This weekend, I'll try to make some basic implementations using reinforcement learning, such as implementing the tic-tac-toe game and Pac-Man game, etc. Apart from that, I got in touch with Himanshu as well, and I've scheduled a meeting with him tomorrow afternoon, and he may be able to give me some idea on how like his project can be expanded or can be or reinforcement learning can be applied in this year's project. So once I talk with him and I formulate some idea, I'll let you know. Yeah, that's all.
All right. That's great. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the outcomes of that. We talked about reinforcement learning last week. I think it was pretty good. Kind of getting into the improving things, and yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I hope that goes well. Keep me posted on the results of that. Vrushali posted, I've given mine and I'll share my work on Slack, GitHub within a few days. So yeah, Vrushali, of course, is working on UI. So look forward to seeing that. Jesse, how are you?
Okay. I'm sorry for background noise right now. I'm moving around awkwardly.
All right.
I'm alright.
Good.
I don't have any major updates for like group stuff this week. Um, just well, I guess the update is that I'm continuing to push forward on the website, which is mostly there. There's still a few. I need to get the Diva Worm people from the other group basically to be on the website, but things are coming there. I've been thinking a lot about some of the mentoring, professional development related stuff as well, but no real major updates this week.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Things are coming along on that. I did want to ask Raj and Vrushali, I did invite you to our GitHub
Yes.
organization. So we actually talked about that this week. And so if you I don't know if you accepted the invitations. I think you did. I can't remember right now what the status of them are, but that gives you membership into the organizational GitHub, and you can do. Okay, good. Yes, so you can do things there. You can push things without having being sort of having to wait for review of things. So that's where we'll work from. Where we're going to work from the Orel group GitHub. So I don't know. I mean, I know you're working on your own, kind of in your own repositories, but we're also going to try to push things there as we go along, and especially when we finish up the projects. I usually like to have an archive of the projects there, at least. So I mean, you
Yes.
can work on your own GitHub, but we want to push things to that, and I'll maybe towards the end of the semester I'll remind you about. Well, I think you know where the GSoC repository is there, and so it would be I think under like 2023 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but that's where you would work from, and we might make a special place for a repository for the projects. So, and yeah, just to let you know about that. So thanks for accepting those.
Yeah, I might show that quickly if you
Okay,
want
yeah,
to.
yeah, go
I don't know
ahead.
if you really. I'm just getting set up here by the, I guess, Riverside, but I can do that. But basically, and if anybody wants to, get some familiarity with GitHub, or you're not quite sure what to do with it or where to put stuff, I can meet with you, and Bradley can as well, to kind of sort that out. But here, let me share my screen.
All right.
Yeah, this will be fine. So, I updated a little bit of the, like the README stuff, but in this one, you can probably, I see that Vrushali did some stuff there, which is great. When she updated the README file, does it mean this README on this page here?
Go up to the files. 2023 maybe.
This README.
Okay, that one. Good. Okay. While we wait for that, Inka, did you have any updates, or did you want to mention anything?
Raj, do you have any updates from your side?
I think he already gave updates. Well, he gave an update on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I already gave my update. It was just that I tried to go through some introductory courses regarding reinforcement learning. I went through the prerequisite maths that is required, such as knockout, fill, manipulation, etc. And this weekend I'll be spending to implement some basic games or basic projects that revolve around reinforcement learning, such as tic-tac-toe game, etc. And apart from that, I have a meeting scheduled with Himanshu for tomorrow, where he'll be helping me understand his thought process and motivation behind his last year's work, so that I can get some idea regarding that. Yeah, that's my update.
Yeah, that seems fine. But don't get lost in trying to understand RL, because I think RL is quite a big field. So I think, as discussed, I think till Q learning, I think that's mm, the like the amount you should cover. After that, I think it just all goes into too much depth. So yeah, and did you update the document?
Uh,
Uh, I I'll do that soon. And yeah, even I read about some things beyond Q learning, but yeah, they do seem overwhelming. So yeah, I think Q learning is the upper limit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think currently, I think beyond Q learning, that's a bit out of scope. So, like, I think I'll probably discuss what I had talked with Raj. So, Bradley, I think what we I had discussed with Raj was that as far as his project goes, it seems that he has kind of figured out like how he would like connect the RL the simulation to the website. But as far as his current scope of the project goes, I think for him to like implement something small using Mesa, that would be like the good start for then moving on to implementing these models. So that's what I've told him currently to like read a little bit about RL and like implement something small, some agent in Mesa, and then like try and connect it so that he'll probably then it will just make his work a lot more easier when he's implementing those new learning stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, definitely focus on, sort of don't try to go and learn everything about reinforcement learning because there is a lot there. I think we already have sort of Q learning in place, but, it might be improved. And then, implementing it in MISA would be good. Just to make sure that we can do something that isn't going to take, like, I don't want you to take like 10 weeks to work on learning reinforcement learning because we obviously don't have that much time. But I think it's probably not that hard to pick up the basics. I mean, you have to learn the basics of it, but also just kind of learning how you would implement it. So yeah, I agree. This looks like a good plan. So um, yeah, try it out and see how it works. And again, you don't have to learn everything, and you don't have to shoot for the moon. Just try to do something very tractable. Um,
I think currently, as far as the scope goes, I think you should just be like familiar with like how Q learning works and like when you and how you can implement it in uh, in the current Mesa environment. I think that's like it. Like any like how you can implement and like run an agent in Q learning. I think that's all like you need to like know. Other than that, like you don't really need to know. Yeah. So a follow up on that is that Raj, by next week, what are your goals with respect to the this RL part? Can you tell us?
Uh, I like once this weekend I'll spend it try to implement some basic projects around RN. And once I'm done with that, I'll my goal is to make a basic environment in which like a basic MISA environment which uses reinforcement learning, so that once that is in place, that can be edited and built upon further to achieve what we desire. And to talk with Himanshu and see if he can give some idea on how he thinks the model should be designed.
Yeah, that sounds fine. So
yeah.
basically, you're saying that this weekend, like few days you spent trying to like get a better understanding of like RL. Then by next week, you will say you would want to like probably implement something in Mesa as like a small RL game or something.
Yes, yes.
That sounds right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So one last thing I think before like I think I'll hand it off is that Himanshu he was last year's GSoC student. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
Yes,
So Himanshu he had worked on the like the net logo part of it.
yes.
Okay, yeah, that's great because then you can like specifically, I think the document that we had prepared, right? I think that is really great because you can show the document to Himanshu and then talk about like what we have discussed with respect to like the agent-based approaches, what we understood, and what were like the new things that we discussed with respect to like information flow, etc. So I think talking with Himanshu, tell him about all of this, and also maybe like keep recording the notes of what like he discussed, so that like next time around we could again probably midweek anytime if you want, we could probably like discuss about what ideas does he have with respect to that. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, thank you, Ankit, for the input and feedback. I think that's useful, and yeah, and so yeah, we want to put together something, in a couple weeks. I don't know what your timeline is beyond that, but I don't know if you want to also talk to Brian McCorkle, who was also involved in like building the active inference models last year. So that I don't want you to learn active inference for the summer. I think RL is enough, but I think like maybe just being able to get the RL model up, and maybe get the other models sort of, don't worry about improving them, put them up, would be good, because yeah, I think that, well, we'll see how that goes. Just let's focus on the reinforcement learning first, and then we can get there. And then Vrushali, of course, is working on her work, the UI work. So I look forward to seeing those contributions soon. Okay, so that sounds good. Did anyone have anything else they wanted? Oh, go
Raj,
ahead.
yeah, next week could you like show like a small demo of the Mesa agent maybe?
Uh, yeah, sure. I'll see what I can do.
I think that would be like very helpful, right? Because we'll get to know about like where we were getting stuck, if not, if like where we need help, like so that like if you can show like a small like simulation in Mesa, right? That would be really great.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be good. And even if you could share it before then in the GSoC channel, that would be good, so we can see it before you do the demo, and then we can like think about like. But I think it should be pretty straightforward. I don't. I only briefly like worked with Misa, so I don't know what the. I know they have a lot of documentation, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, let's plan on doing a demo next week. Yeah. Google Doc of discussions. Okay. Great. So I don't know if Jesse had anything this week. I know he usually has a
Google Doc of our discussions. Do you mean the Notion space, or which Google Doc?
No. I meant like the discussions that I think me and Raj were having. So we made like a separate document. So I was talking about that.
okay.
Yeah, definitely share that and find ways to have us see that too. Would be great.
Okay. I didn't know if Jesse had anything he wanted to talk about this week.
I mean, I think you guys have seen the. I was attempting to show the Google Summer Code GitHub stuff. I don't know if that went through last time or not, but I think you guys can. It's not like a lot. Did that actually go through last time at all, or was there just nothing that was shared?
What do you mean? Oh, that?
I was just showing. I'm just going through the GitHub.
Yeah. So that's the GSoC 23. Those are the two projects, those directories, and then yeah.
Thank you for updating the README here, Vrushali. Yes. We might try to update some more things here. It's a great way to get used to doing like the issues. I don't know if we can make a specific project board for Google Summer Code for this year, like list specific tasks that we want to do. This is the way to keep us on track and kind of where we are. I might make a project board now. I don't want to be on camera to do it, but just to kind of like get used to assigning things or what it's like to kind of share things across teams and stuff like that. So I might build that out a little bit in the background. But yeah, just showing you where that was. I think everybody's seen it by now.
All right.
It'd be good to do updates there.
Okay. All right. So, go ahead.
Just a question. I just thought like it would be like great for like all of the GSoC participants to like maybe like whatever stage you are, like you could write like a small like medium article based on like what your current progress is. So for example, I think Vrushali probably is working on like AR if I'm not wrong, AR or AR slash VR. So, for example, so she could write like a medium article that would sort of be like a midway through GSoC, like what are the problems you are facing, what you are doing. Similarly, I think Raj could probably write one where he could like talk a little bit about his like Q learning stuff, simulation. So that would really help put whatever you have learned to practice, I think.
Yeah, they were doing that during the community period. Yeah, the habit is so. I think a couple years ago there was a requirement through INCF to do that every week, but we don't have that requirement anymore. And I didn't want to force people to do it necessarily because they're working on their projects. But I think if you can do that, and I don't think it's necessary every week because you're making progress at different paces. So if I would encourage you to write kind of maybe every couple weeks or something, put an update together. And like I said, this will be useful for documentation later on. And, we can also use it for like archival purposes to kind of review what happened over the summer. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously not every week. That is very hectic. But like I feel like when you're like getting maybe like trying to understand like a topic, uh, then and so like and then you feel like it's a little bit hard. For example, then you could probably write about it, so it would make it a lot more like clear about what you're understanding. So only then, but like every week, I think that's obviously a little bit like too much. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we had a few discussions before you joined Ankit about that specifically, and both like recording your own internal thoughts and like just documenting your headspace, which is an interesting topic, but also, yes, actually making artifacts for other people or that are more public facing. It's always a great thing to do. Um, so yeah, between that and updating GitHub and kind of going through some of the issues, I think that'll be kind of a nice component. But also doing writings too and like recording them. Like you can make it a Medium post. I know there's been links in the past about that. So I think individual GitHubs or individual Mediums, but we could put them on the main one too, or have a compilation of like a midterm compilation of updates and stuff too. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to say something else, Bradley.
Well, we have the first evaluation coming up in a couple weeks, I think. So if each student has to complete an evaluation, I think, and then I complete an evaluation. So that's something that is not that difficult. It's kind of just a formality. I'm going to evaluate you, and then I'm going to give some feedback. And the feedback will be largely about what I want you to do kind of in the next stage of the project. So, usually that's just kind of like, I think both of you are doing fine. It's just I need to give you some feedback. And, the next stage of the project will be kind of, getting a lot of this stuff, pulling it together so that in the third part of after the second evaluation, we're in the third leg of GSoC, we can start to build a final project and put it together. So, you're doing a lot of you're working hard and you're kind of learning new things. Your schedule isn't exactly what you had planned initially, but that's fine. That's what we do. And then that will be in the second. This is kind of like, the community period is the first part This is the second part. Then the third part is going to be in kind of like mid to late July and August, where you kind of work towards getting everything together for a final project evaluation. So, you know, you don't need to wrap it up maybe until the last week, but you need to kind of think about what that final submission will look like. And so this is where we're getting, like with Raja's project, we have the web interface, we have the models. If we can get some models into MISA, if we can get some of that going maybe live by the end of the project, that would be great. With Vrushali, you know, we have the UI, we have the models, we have that, so we can try to build towards a finished product, you know, or project by the submission date. So, you know, don't worry about like, you know, the progress isn't going to be linear. It's going to be, you know, working on different things, making sure you understand things and get them implemented. And then in that third leg, we're going to kind of wrap things up in the sense of getting things to work and that sort of thing. So that's where we're going to be in the next maybe couple weeks. And so if you get an email from the program and they ask you to do an evaluation, please fill it out. And then I will do my part on the evaluation. And then, you know, that part of that milestone will be fulfilled. So just a heads up on that. Now I wanted to talk, last week I didn't get to talk about synthetic data. And I wanted to cut a video this week, but I didn't have time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about synthetic data. And I wanted to talk about it in the context of the open source sustainability project. And so we talked about this last year. So the open source sustainability, oh yeah, sometimes you have to cut a video, sometimes you have to cut a promo. So we talked about in last year's open source sustainability discussions, we talked about using synthetic data in lieu of actual community data. So one part of this project for open source sustainability is sort of getting data from real communities, putting it into a model, and then getting some answers out. Or rather, kind of figuring out what the measures are that we can take from real communities. Now, it's hard to get the data, especially if it's not in GitHub. So we have this problem of how do we get something to calibrate our models against without, you know, spending like a year getting data or getting, you know, maybe even collecting it ourselves in the form of primary data. And one answer is synthetic data. So synthetic data, people use it in, I think, in AI and machine learning a lot. They use it to calibrate, to train their models. And this is just data that you create based on what you think is happening. So, you know, you can model a process. You can measure a process and get a distribution. And that distribution is a certain standard deviation and mean and all that. And then you can model that variable as, you know, you can resample it, and you can build a larger N or a number of samples. And so this is, you know, one of the uses of synthetic data is for resampling. Another is for just kind of creating variables that you think are happening, and you have certain assumptions. You say, okay, this is what the mean and the standard deviation look like. And you can create multiple data sets where you have these data sort of generated by some process, and that tells you something about what you think is happening. So it's kind of like a theoretical thing where you want to know, you know, maybe you want to assume that there's certain activity in certain parts of your community. For example, you want to maybe simulate the distribution of Slack messages, or you want to simulate the distribution of GitHub issues or GitHub commits or things like that. And so you can actually use real data to kind of inform what you're thinking, but that's not probably enough data to really kind of train a model or to really say anything meaningful about it. So this is where synthetic data comes into play. if we take we were sort of casually looking at a few organizations on GitHub, and you can collect some cursory data if you don't have access to their API settings and things like that. You can't really get their data, so it's going to be hard for you to actually do that. But you can get some cursory information and then simulate a variable around that. So that's why you might want to use synthetic data. So I'm going to share my screen here. And so last year we talked about simulated data. I discussed a few readings on this. So this is from DataGen. This is simulated data is synthetic data 2.0. This is from 2020. So this is, I don't think these are really changed that much over time, but they're kind of talking about the promise of synthetic data. So the promise of synthetic data has been clear since its inception. By creating a fully synthetic set of data that mimics statistical patterns existent in real data sets. So this is where we're, taking some data where we may have a very sparse sampling and, just simulate it saying, this is the standard deviation, this is the normal distribution. And it doesn't have to be normally distributed, but you pick a distribution, you pick some parameters to describe sort of how the data should be distributed within that distribution, and then you can actually kind of give a surrogate of a real data set. So you can mimic those statistical patterns. Synthetic data could enable analysis in data science without compromising privacy. It also promises to be a highly scalable and manipulable form of information, faster to generate, and able to fill data gaps where real data would be impossible or expensive to collect. So again, this is what I was talking about with respect to, we can't get access to the kinds of community data that we want. It might take a long time to do that. But we can simulate data, especially for simulations, because it just basically gives the simulation something to work with. Now, you can also, what you can do is create, variables to plug into your simulation. And then, run the simulation. And then there's an output of data from that simulation that you can then use as simulated data. So sometimes the simulated data is done maybe in Python, where you just simulate distributions and you resample, from a set of parameters. Sometimes we can do this in an agent-based model, where we have, like in the reinforcement learning model, we have different types of issues. So Earth shot, Moon shot, Mars, Jupiter shot. And we have the number. And then maybe we have the number of maintainers. And then, we can simulate those according to how they sort of behave in the simulation. We give maybe an initial seed of a parameter value. And then given that seed, we have this sort of behavior. So that's another way to do simulated data, is to plug it into something like an agent-based model and simulate it that way. That way you're actually getting interactions. If you set the model up according to what you think is going on in the real world, it's actually the endpoint of an interaction process instead of just like a simulation of a random number generator according to the rules of the distribution. So, there are a lot of ways you can do this. Simulated data is used in a lot of places. It's shown promise from medical research in terms of managing patient privacy and fraud detection. You can test and increase the robustness of security solutions. So you can use, you can actually do this without actually engaging with real data and incurring real risks. More recently, synthetic data has been applied with some success to machine learning applications as a source of training data for algorithmic systems. So this is where I was talking about with machine learning, and even with reinforcement learning. You may need to have some training data, some inputs that give it some information about the world. And so this is where this comes into play. You have like training data from your data set, but sometimes you have a data set and you have to split it into the training set and the test set. And sometimes you don't have enough data to do that successfully. So you can train it on simulated data. You can then test it and see if it matches a training test set split, and you can evaluate it to see if it works. So that's been applied to models like that as well. But there is skepticism. So first of all, can synthetic data accurately reflect the real world? Can it capture the nuanced statistical realities of real data sets? So in real data sets, you have outliers, and a lot of times people treat outliers as like bad, that they want to like normalize them or get rid of them somehow. But sometimes outliers can tell us a lot about the system. Sometimes the outliers, we measure data, and we're always kind of collecting data, and even if we have a large N, it's just a statement on the observation of the world that we live in. So if we make 1,000 samples of the world, that's not the entirety of all observations, all possible observations. That's only a small number of observations. And so when we get outliers in that kind of a situation, or any kind of a situation where we're sampling randomly from the world, we have to sort of, we think we have the mean, we think we have the standard deviation, but those outliers can shift and actually increase the standard deviation or increase the mean. So we don't want to throw them out. But sometimes we know outliers are obviously wrong. So those kind of judgments are still in play. So these are things that you have to pay attention to when building a synthetic data set. And similarly, when we create a synthetic data set, we're usually sampling from an idealized distribution. So we have to think about a couple of things there. We have to think about the distribution we're using. So a lot of people like sort of normal or Gaussian distributions. And so that's great to do that, but you have to remember that if you're dealing with that type of data, which is identically independently distributed, independent data points. So that means that when a data point is generated, it's generated without respect to space or time, and that there's this independent distribution idealized so that any point we draw from the distribution is just kind of a random sample. And it's part of that distribution, but it's not like dependent in time or dependent in space. So if I took a time series and I said, I want to find out, I just want to like simulate a time series, and I simulate it using a Gaussian without respect to thinking about the time series, I generate basically a random time series. The same thing as spatial distributions. I can generate a cloud of points around a single mean point, but I can't really generate spatial distributions that are structured. That's why in last week we talked about Gibsonian information. That's why we use the Poisson distribution there, because it introduces that kind of temporal and spatial structure that we need. So simulating data in ways like that can make a difference in what it looks like and how useful it is. So we want to pick the right distribution. We want to pick the right sampling scheme. We don't want to just sample from one end of the distribution. We want to sample across the distribution. And we want to maybe, if we can get real data, get enough data so that we can really make a good venture a really good guess as to what the distribution should be. Because if we only take like 3 or 4 points, it doesn't really make much sense. In I used to do these labs for like biochemistry and microbiology, and we used to do like experiments where we would have like a 3-point. We would try to make a statistical inference from 3 points. That's kind of common in that area because you can't run too many experiments. So you have like 3 points. You pick the middle as like the mean, and the other 2 are outliers. Now that's something you want to avoid in most other contexts because you need to have this variation there so we know what the distribution looks like. So this is the kind of thing we have to think about when we build simulated data. So this is kind of an advertisement for their company, but they're doing a lot of things with simulated data. They're creating GANs, which are generative adversarial networks. They're pasting a subject onto different backgrounds to create variation. So they're doing these things that create a distribution that they can then simulate, and then they can make insights or use it sometimes in training other types of machine learning models. So this is, there are a lot of things we can do here with simulated data. More specific to something like machine learning, I have an article here from Altixsoft. This is where they talk about sort of synthetic data and something called data augmentation. So in a lot of our machine learning projects, we have used data augmentation where you take an existing data set and you augment it by sampling it and then kind of merging those two things together. It's a nice sample for machine learning. I wouldn't necessarily use it for like data collection or data analysis, but if you want to train a model quickly, in the case of maybe a reinforcement learning model, this might be useful. Having a procedure for data augmentation would work. There are also data randomizers, some other things about synthetic data that I already mentioned. And then you have to have, there are different types of synthetic data related to the composition of the thing. So there are two types of synthetic data, partial and full. The partial type is a data set that includes synthetic data and real data from existing observations or measurements. So this is where we have this data augmentation. We have synthetic data plus real data. So this is an example here, I think, of partial synthetic data where we have a background that's sort of an image, and then we have a car sitting in the foreground, and it just shows where the car is relative to the background. And then the full type refers to data sets where only synthetic data is used. So this is an example here where the background is simulated, the car is put in that simulation environment, and then both of those are, this is a picture of a car, so both of those are in there. So this is a virtual car, this is the virtual background, and it fits in there. So the whole thing is synthetic. This is something, again, you can do this in different ways. You can also do this with in XR, in VR as well. You can build a scene, you can generate a scene, and there's certain parameters you're using to generate that scene. You can go and you can collect data from the real world to sort of inform what it should look like, or you can simulate what that data should look like. So, for example, the way light falls on an object, you can get data from the real world, or you can simulate a distribution, and that's good enough. So people play around with that in that domain as well. And so at the same time, the models trained on synthetic input only might not ensure the best quality and safety in certain cases. So, for example, software for automated vehicles is better when trained on synthetic data and real data. So if you're like doing self-driving vehicles, you don't want to just rely on synthetic data. You want to rely on real data for real conditions, because the synthetic data is often where you run into problems where, a car will run a stop sign or hit a car that's in a weird position. So you want to have that sort of ground truthing. Other machine learning models that are less sort of mission critical or real-time critical can be trained on synthetic data only. And so, I will mention that, sometimes we know what the distribution is, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we know that, like, we use a certain distribution to model the data. Sometimes we don't know what process generated the data at all in the real world. So we have to use real world data for that. I think in the case of our open source sustainability models, we can just use normal, standard, out of the box distributions, and we'll probably be okay. I think a lot of normal distributions, maybe some exponential distributions, but I don't think that's a problem. So when and why synthetic data is used. Sometimes it's cheaper, of course, to use synthetic data. Obviously, like I said, it takes a lot of effort and time to get real world data. Sometimes you want to, explore rare data using it. So rare data is something that is, it's basically not observable a lot of the time. So, like if you have a 50-year flood, you can't observe that all the time. You can observe it more frequently now, but it's still not something you can study with a lot of cases. It's only a few cases. So, you may want to simulate those rare events, to see what they look like, because you're not going to get those in the real world. You can also deal with privacy issues, and you can easily label and control synthetic data. So, a lot of times, with respect to human subjects data or biological data, it's kind of hard to label the data. I mean, you can label it, but with synthetic data, you can label things and test different labels to see which ones are the best for your data. Because oftentimes labels are kind of generated in an ad hoc manner. Like, if I were to go and join a community and fill out a form, that form is useful only to an extent. It may or may not give me all the information I need to label my data, especially if I'm merging two data sets together. So these are all things that we can play with synthetic data. And so we can use generative models, or we can use these kind of simulators in a statistical package. You can use Python or MATLAB too. They have simulators for different distributions. So that's a nice article, and I can make these articles available. Final thing I wanted to talk about with respect to this is this article on. Well, this is not it. Let me go out to this. I think that may be all I have for this. Why is it not coming up? All right, I think that's all I have for this. Yeah, I thought I had another article, but that's fine. So let me check the chat here. So Raj said he'll be back in a few minutes. Sometimes you have, okay, that was the old. So I guess that's all I have for synthetic data. Like I said, I'm not gonna create. I could create some synthetic data set examples, but I think it's probably more useful just to basically play with it within the context of the models, maybe train the models. So that's I just wanted to go over that really quickly for people.
Hey, Bradley, these meetings are going to end up on the orals YouTube, right?
Yes.
I missed some of the presentation. I want to go back and see some of the synthetic talk. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing that. It's come up a lot recently. So, yeah.
No problem. Any questions about that? Any of that discussion points? Okay. So Jesse had. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Very well explained. So yeah, Jesse has put in the chat something on projects.
Oh yeah, it's just the I just set up the board quickly to kind of update stuff. Sorry, my using. That's a little weird. Oh, I don't know if I've saved this. Oh well. But anyway, I should save this. Just to kind of show, that's so weird. All the stuff I did here isn't showing up anymore. Anyway, let's please use this view. I just did a few things here. Bradley just did the the synthetic data presentation. So put that here. Yay, great. But just to kind of keep track of stuff, I kind of mentioned I assigned some update the README very simple tasks. I don't know how people want to write about. I did a generic thing about our reinforcement learning demo, midterm reports, which are due July 10th. So I put some timeline stuff on there, and I assigned myself this task updating the website just because that's when it's happening. But it's very simple task board right now. Nothing too major, just to keep track of stuff. Feel free to add issues here that you want to do. You can create your own. I would, if you want like ultimate best practice, you don't have to do this. It doesn't really matter. But if you want to add an item to any of these things, or when you're in your projects or whatever, you can like, you all should be invited now to the team so you can do this, but you can use the hashtag to have it be set to in the Google Summer Code repo, and then just type out what you want, and do it this way, and make an issue like that, and right here. So we don't, not a big deal if you don't want to do it, but it's encouraged to start writing issues, and if you have questions, you can tag people in it, just so you can kind of get used to that process of working on things here. So that's
And
all.
thank you for assigning people too, because that's another part of it. And so if you have something assigned to you, you can just check the board. You can actually search for your own name, or you can look. I don't think we have that many issues, so we can just look at the different avatars. Yeah.
If there was a lot more stuff and we get really complicated, we could create like specific views, or like even make a project for each individual project. But I think that's, we don't have to get that deep in the weeds about it, but just kind of getting used to the process of assigning issues, or if there's a part of your code you want to highlight, or I mean, this is kind of a bit of a trivial example right now, but like I went I linked the actual README page here. You can like go in here and play around with it, and add issues through that way too, and stuff like that, which I understand people are more familiar with or less familiar with, but just getting practice to it, even getting used to a relatively new project setup. Like GitHub's been kind of updating its project map. Like this actually I don't know why this isn't quite showing like we did before, but they're offering you this sort of roadmap view, like not really Gantt chart, but these different views and boards. Just getting used to that might be good for you down the road too. But
Yeah, I think this is good professional development stuff. So actually, before you stop sharing, I wanted to add maybe two things onto this board. So one is that Raj is going to meet with Himanshu, and just put that up there so we know that happened. And Himanshu's actually doing a project in Devorm this summer. So he's actually in that mindset of working on GSoC. So that's great. And then we can just update on the results of that. There we go.
Okay.
And I don't think we need to assign it to Himanshu as well. Maybe. I don't know if he's in here, though. I don't think he is. He may be, because he was in last summer's.
Let's see. Yeah,
there he is. Yeah. Himanshu 02. There we go. All right. So that's... And then... let's see.
Anything else?
Maybe we add another one for Vrushali, which is the having the things posted in... or having like a report on her things that she was talking about. So she's got some UI submissions, I guess would be the name of it. Just to keep us all like kind of making sure that we get these down.
Would it be like something like upload UI to GitHub, or how do we want to say that?
Yeah, I think upload UI to GitHub. It's a good milestone. And so that's something that, like, once that's done, we can, or if we need more time on it. Okay.
Everybody's RV and VR. So
yeah. There we go. All right, and then those are to do. So now you have something on the board. Thank you for creating that, Jesse.
Yeah, and obviously, just so you guys know, I know that you've all been doing much more work than us on this board, so I don't think this board is the only thing that we think that you've done. It's just sort of getting used to using it and populating it regularly. I do encourage you to use it or add, for example, just to say, if you want to, if you think of something over the week or something comes up in Slack, Google Summer of Code, and we're like, oh, let's do this or whatever, please consider making an issue here too, just so what we're going to do is just basically check this board during the weekly meetings and just make sure, hey, what's in the to do, wherever made progress. So adding your own issues, and you can if you want, you can look into it, but it's not hard to you can at people, you can assign things like that, or reference other tickets. If you just to say this with a kind of a cool thing sometimes, um, I'm going to reference. I just did when I do hashtag like this, it will show, because this is in the Google Summer Code repo, is the home repo for this, which I said earlier. Um, uh, I'm gonna go back and look at this. So 23, I'm just gonna add 23, and that will reference that one, and you can kind of make a big series of checklists and checkboxes and things like that, and so on and so forth. So it's a fun way to play around when you get used to being it for other people, getting used to kind of making some really explicit. We made some really general ones right here, but you can make some very explicit issues that you want to keep track of over time. So I encourage you to play around with it to that end. The end.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, so this will become, I think, more useful towards the third part of our GSoC summer, where we're really kind of putting things together and making sure that they're in place. We can use this board to kind of make sure everything is in place. So we'll be ramping up on this in the next
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the issues will also help with documentation too down the road, because you can just look back and say, oh yeah, I did meet with Himanshu. I did upload this as at that time. I did explore this code. I did ask this question, and so on and so forth. So it will help you with that for Google Summer of Code, and also in the future you want to kind of make these little sort of artifact notes, issues and such.
Great. Okay, any other things before we go? Any comments or questions?
Jesus, already the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that went so fast.
All right. Well, thank you for attending, and hope to see some of you tomorrow, and then see you next week. Have a good week of doing GSoC.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye. Thanks.